Good evening, DABI. It's Khonsuview, the littlest admin again. I actually signed up for this review of A Duel for the Ages maybe 2 weeks ago. I think this log has actually been sitting there for over a month now, but uh, ended up having to go on a trip and out of town. Had to go to a wedding, and how that goes. Anyway, I did read it back then, so I have notes from then, but I'm probably gonna forget a little bit of the stuff I was gonna talk about. Either way, I think this this log deserves a review like every log, but also I think this is a really cool log for several reasons. Um, it's funny because uh, when this first starts out, there's a lot of world building in the first couple paragraphs, and I'm not up to date. I know Kraft has role played before, and Ahir, if I'm saying that right. I think might have had another role play. I don't believe I read it, but I did read one of Kraft's. Um, Although I think Kraft's might have been near the beginning when kind of the homeworld was getting established. Um, but I'm not 100% sure on that because Vinians are a new race to DBI. They're not in DBZ technically. They're loosely based off of our well, I don't want to give spoilers, but someone later in not in the manga or whatever. But one of the cool things, funny things, and I guess you could play them however you want. But currently, Vinians are kind of known as the magical race of the roleplay world, which is completely opposite of what they are in the game, which is they're just like these like punch kicking, uh, they're very melee heavy. But anyway, this starts out talking about the classroom that they're in, how they do magic. It uses a lot of words. It's almost kind of like this weird, I don't know, word salad in the beginning where you don't know what's going on, and I think that can kind of be bad at times because a reader is kind of like, what do all these things mean? But if you read on a little bit, everything pretty much gets explained. So it has context later, which I think is great because you're talking about like the Ganitar Elite and some other stuff. I think it's just in this first paragraph. Like, let's see here. Southern Quadrant of Zahiron, which I'm uh, maybe it's the whole planet, and like maybe this is my bad because I haven't read the wiki world anvil for them in a long time. But either way, my point is still just kind of like you learn a lot in this first paragraph, and it gives you some questions, which can also be good too. And then later you learn a little bit more about who's training them and stuff like that. It's funny because I don't know if it's like an inside joke or like diss that they've used for him before, but they call Kraft Boner, and I thought that was just really odd. Who can at least best Boner Kraft? And like, it's a weird way to use that insult. Like, I don't think that's how you might call someone a boner, I guess. But I don't know if that came from somewhere, and it's mentioned later, so they'd only use it once. So I think it's some sort of like continuing, almost like schoolyard insult, and maybe that was the point of it too. Is kind of be like, hey, these are like kids, sort of, are young people who are a little immature. Um, and I want to say the whole thing here gives off this like very Harry Potterish vibe, where they're like magic elites learning all this stuff on their planet, but they've got to learn how to fight now because we can't always. Even though they have these elites, I think they're supposed to protect them in certain aspects. But they're like, oh well, like we're gonna learn how to do CQC, like close quarters combat stuff now. So we're gonna go down there and train that, and like you're not only gonna be able to rely on your magic kind of deal. It's also shows us that like at least Kraft um, almost kind of like describes himself as this like pariah, that he's like better or above these like lower case of people. And I don't know if that's something like the way the hierarchy works totally within like this city, or just that's how Vinians, if you're not magically adept, that you're just considered lesser, which can be very interesting for different reasons. But it is kind of funny that like he's thinking less of them, but then he's going there to learn with them, and like I guess that could happen in other situations too. But Kraft almost kind of paints himself as like the chosen one, like he's the best student in the class, and I think a hero is kind of there to be like, oh, I could show you up anyway, like you think you're so great kind of deal. So um, another thing that kind of like shows their hoity-toityness to me was that they flip a coin to decide who goes first, and they flip it I think 10 times. It's this kind of thing like, it's like, oh well, let's not start. Yeah, here it is. I'd like you all to throw coins 10 times. Actually, I remember why I wrote a note down about this. Is the professor who did it. So like for the professor to tell them like, oh, this is how we decide things. We're gonna flip a coin 10 times. We're gonna stop everything and just flip the coin 10 times to see who goes. Um, so it kind of shows this kind of like is that how they choose everything? Like they have time to sit there and be like, oh well, let's wait and make a decision. Let's flip a coin 10 times to see who starts off this next combat round. When it could be like one coin flip, it kind of shows this thing of like, oh, we do things as a special way. It just seems to me a little funny. Um, or maybe it's just so like they're trying to decide, but it's like you could just draw straws or pick two people, because I think I guess the whole point of the 10 times thing though is just like, well, that makes it even more ridiculous. I think actually everyone's flipping a coin 10 times, and you're counting how many times you get heads and how many times you get tails, and so if you get the most tails, you fight the person with the most heads, and he does like a little manipulation trick to make sure that they're matched up against each other, because they want to battle each other, and of course for the story too, right? um, the My favorite part about this, and I'm not usually I mean, I know what genre we're in, and like fighting is a big part of how you get reds and stuff like that, but I'm actually usually not the biggest fan of fight scenes. I just kind of um, you know I'll, some of them are really really cool, but for a lot of times I'll just skim over them, and it's not because they're not good, but it's just kind of like I want to get to what I feel like is the meat and potatoes, where you're like learning stuff. But I think if they actually did a really good job during this, because they showed a lot of, they kind of mentioned their culture, dance, and like expressions of the Ganitar. If I'm saying that right again, I have no idea how these words are pronounced, but well, they're made up, right? So, um, but no, like the fight did a good job of not just being like, how good can I punch you? And it kind of had a lot of like story building in it, which I think is like, if there's going to be a fight, um, that's how I like to see it. Um, then they get into a fight. I think they're not supposed to use magic, and they decide to use a little bit of magic, and that's when things go wrong. It reacts, and it's kind of funny because I assume they've had magic duels and they've used magic before. I'm not sure why at this point, in the middle of this, I think I forget what did they use. Sorry, it's been a while since I read it. I probably should have reread it, but I think they were using like bow staffs or something, um, or maybe some other type of weapon. The teachers had told them like, don't use magic, and I don't know why they couldn't put like a magic dampening field, or maybe these two people just have a certain ability that let them break through. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, right? It's just like, it's for the story, and it was a good story. So anyway, their magics react, and maybe that's because they're two opposing magics. I'm not sure. We don't really know that yet, but what it seems like is that they are then sent through time, and this moves them forward. They go to like, they basically walk out, and like I think the place is pretty much wrecked, and someone is bound to have recorded something. But they don't really know what's going on. They think I think they mention it's only been a few months, but I'm wondering if it's actually been a much longer time. So I don't know if this is kind of like a way of them being from the far past and get caught back up to everybody, or if this was just simply a kind of like, here's what's we're gonna have to figure out next. Here's the next plot point, and we're gonna figure out what happened to like um, our city. But he even mentions up here like, has reality been altered? So maybe these skipped timelines. I guess we'll have to see. I don't know, and it's been a month, so I actually should probably. I thought I saw there was at least one other log that was written by them, but I will have to go and see. But anyway, great marks all around for everybody. Not that I'm grading anyone, but I thought this was a great RP and I enjoyed it. And I need to go figure out more. So I'll see you guys in the next one.